Hi, I'm Eric Bolling in for Bill O'Reilly. Thanks for watching us tonight. Let's get straight to our top story. A very busy day for the Trump presidential transition team. Earlier this evening, President-elect Donald Trump wrapped up a meeting with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe at Trump Tower. It was Trump's first in-person meeting with a foreign leader since the election. And a short time ago, I spoke with Trump transition senior advisor Kellyanne Conway about all the latest developments in the transition. So the news for me today, wow, eye-opening. Mitt Romney will meet with the boss, President-elect Donald Trump, over the weekend. What's that all about?
Well, Donald Trump does what businessmen do. He takes the counsel of allies, rivals, people from across the aisle, never-Trumpers in this case, and frankly, in the case of Governor Romney, somebody who did a good job in his state of Massachusetts as governor, ran for president twice, and has a lot to add to the conversation. So I count about 8 meetings that I know of for that same day in New Jersey on Saturday, and Governor Romney will be one of them. And I know Mr. Trump is delighted to welcome him here.
Welcome him in what capacity? Is it interviewing for a job? I mean, the Secretary of State has been floated, but is it to just download him on what's going on, Romney, or to actually interview him for a possible appointment?
Well, that conversation is between the two of them, Eric. I will tell you that not every conversation Mr. Trump is having this week as the president-elect is going to lead to a cabinet position or is going to lead to a senior strategy role. He is a man who listens and who learns, and one listens and learns from him as well. So it's always a two-way street. But as president-elect, he knows it's incumbent upon him to take meetings with any number of people over the phone and in person, from world leaders to sitting legislators and opinion leaders to those, like in the case of Governor Romney, have been through the political fire before, represented the party as its nominee last time around, didn't make it, of course, and to really talk about what they've learned together about America, what the party represents, what the country is asking for in terms of leadership. Mitt Romney's a job creator. He's an American success story. He knows a lot about the world. Many things that Mitt Romney talked about in his 2012 election with respect to the world stage have come true. And I anticipate, you know, a meeting of the minds and of two equal partners in terms of those who love their country and want to make sure we have a peaceful and democratic transition into the next administration. And we know that Governor Romney can add to that conversation.
All right, well, let's move on to President Obama. Earlier today, he was in Berlin, and he addressed the situation with Russia, how Vladimir Putin would work with your boss, the president-elect Donald Trump. Had some interesting comments. Take a listen.
My hope is that the president-elect coming in takes a similarly constructive approach, finding areas where we can cooperate with Russia, our values and interests align, but that the president-elect also is willing to stand up to Russia where they are deviating from our values and international norms.
Kelly, how do you take that? I mean, on one hand, it seemed like he was extending the olive branch, and then on the other hand, he said, you better learn how to push back against Putin. Is that a positive or negative from the president?
That seems fair, and look, that seems fair and reasonable from President Obama. I don't think that was, you know, hashtag breaking news necessarily. But what I do think, Eric, is that it cuts right to the heart of what many in the media have been saying about Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, that somehow they're friends and intimates, and Donald Trump's going to work with Vladimir Putin. You just heard President Obama say, find constructive ways to work with Russia when it is in America's best interest, and find ways to push back when it's not. That's what Donald Trump has been saying on the campaign trail all along. And I appreciate President Obama saying that tonight. I also appreciate, frankly, the support that he and Vice President Biden and their spouses have given to the Trumps and the Pences in this last week, because, you know, as recently as yesterday, Vice President Biden said, let's be fair. It takes a while to form a government. We weren't ready on day one of transition. They weren't ready on day one of transition, but that he's, quote, confident that the country will be ready, and Trump and Pence will be ready on day one when they're sworn in. And I think this is the president saying that he hopes the next president at least tries to find a balance in our relationships with Russia.
So let's stay on Russia just for a minute here. How will the U.S. relationship with Russia evolve under President Trump? Whereas where we were before, in fact, President Obama said Russia was our greatest foe, one of our greatest enemies. Will that change, and how will it change, and why will it change?
Well, but today it sounded like President Obama was at least giving advice to his successor, President-elect Trump, to find ways to work with Russia when appropriate. Let's say that Russia wants to join together with the U.S. To really push back on ISIS, on radical Islamic terrorism, which Hillary Clinton describes as our determined enemies, but most Americans recognize as a bunch of savage murderers who do their bloodletting here in places like Orlando and San Bernardino, and certainly abroad in places like Belgium and Paris and Nice. And so what I think President Obama is also signaling is that he knows Donald Trump as the president and commander-in-chief is going to do things perhaps a little bit differently. You're asking how the relationship will be different. That depends an awful lot on Russia also, and not just President Trump. Why? Because President Trump made very clear in his victory speech 8 days ago, Eric, that he's telling the world community, I will always put America first, but I will be fair and I will work with you and listen to you. But he's made very clear from the beginning that part of the Trump doctrine is America first, and he's told the world community that's an open door. But don't be fooled as to these trade deals are going to be renegotiated, jobs are going to come back, and U.S. interests, allies, and Americans themselves are going to be put first.
All right. Kellyanne, also Ted Cruz earlier today made some comments, some fairly provocative comments. Take a listen to these.
We got to deliver. I mean, it is time to put up or shut up. If Republicans go to Washington and we don't deliver on what we promised, I think we'll be looking at pitchforks and torches in the street, and quite rightly. And that can't happen.
So here's where we stand. We have a president that's going to come in. He'll have the House. He'll have the Senate. He'll have 62% of the states will be Republican governors as well. Ted Cruz says we need, as a Republican party, need to put up or shut up. Is that undue pressure? I mean, here the people have spoken.
No. No, this is what the people want. That's not undue pressure. The time for divided government is over. This country put a Republican House, Senate, and President into Washington, a majority of Republican governors for support, the vast majority of Republican-controlled state legislatures. And so they're sending a message that they want things to happen. And in the case of Senator Cruz, who came in second in the primaries behind Donald Trump, the two of them together had a very anti-Washington, anti-establishment, solve problems, fix things, get things done message together. And so Ted Cruz, who put himself out there 3 years ago or so on Obamacare, stood up and did his famous filibuster to try to stop Obamacare from meeting its funding. He's been vindicated. The country has rejected the Affordable Care Act as untenable for many Americans, as increasing their premiums, decreasing their quality and choice and their access. And now we have an opportunity through President-elect Trump to actually do what he promised to do, repeal and replace Obamacare. Replace it with what, people ask? Okay, let's review. Replace it with health savings accounts so that you have a private account in your name. It bears interest. It allows you to control the spending on your health care, your preventive care, and then your medical needs. Secondly, we're going to block grant Medicaid to the states. Take that out of Washington and put it in the states where people there who are in charge, Eric, can assess the needs of its people. Thirdly, allow you and me to purchase health insurance across state lines, much the way you and I buy all of our products and services. Sure. And so, and of course, eliminate the Obamacare penalty that tells Americans either buy the government-run health insurance or pay a penalty. And so there are specific things that can be done. Senator Cruz is absolutely right, and I think all those Republicans who ran on these promises need to deliver.
Can Senator Ted Cruz, can he get nominated? Can he get the nomination after he gets nominated? Can he after the vetting? You know, the Senator Rand Paul said some of the choices he may filibuster some of the choices. Ted Cruz has not been the most popular senator on the Senate floor. Will he have a problem getting confirmed?
Confirmed if he's nominated for something?
Sure, yeah.
In the cabinet?
Yeah, that is a lot. What a lot of Republicans are saying, you know, he's had such a cantankerous relationship with even Republicans on the Senate floor. Is this something, would you put someone in a position where he may have trouble getting confirmed?
Well, first, he's not been appointed or nominated for anything at this moment. But to answer your question, there is something called senatorial courtesy. And often you see, Eric, in these processes that Republicans and Democrats lay down their partisan their partisan armor, and they come together and they say, I'm going to go and vote for someone I've served with in the Senate. But it really depends on the position, and that's a hypothetical at this point since he hasn't been nominated or appointed for anything. But I think I think Senator Cruz in a Republican-controlled Senate is a very important voice and has shown his courage in pushing through issues when others are crying, divided government, we can't do that, we have a Democratic president. Okay, he's absolutely right, and we're going to rely upon Senator Cruz to be a very strong voice. We're very happy he visited President-elect Trump here at the Tower on Tuesday. It was a great meeting.
Kellyanne Conway, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Congratulations, the Trump Transition Senior Advisor. Thank you. Thanks to Kellyanne. Next on the rundown, the former president of Mexico vowing his country will defend its citizens in the United States of America. Is Mexico already preparing to battle with the Trump administration? Right after this. In the Impact segment tonight, relations between the U.S. and Mexico under the Trump presidency. It's no secret that President-elect Donald Trump is taking an aggressive stance against illegal immigration and other issues with Mexico. But former Mexican President Vicente Fox, one of Trump's fiercest critics throughout the campaign, is warning him that Mexico is ready to hit back. Joining us now with reaction from Miami, Elvira Salazar, a news anchor for Mega TV. Thank you for joining us, Ms. Salazar. All right, let's start with that. Vicente Fox saying Mexico should defend the dignity of Mexicans who've crossed the border illegally and entered the United States. Your thoughts?
My thought is that basically Mexico is very concerned about its economy more than anything else. We have to remember that President-elect, or the new president, has said he's going to impose 35% tariff on all Mexican products or Mexican imports coming into the United States. And last week, 10% of the Mexican currency lost its value. So we have to understand that.
Can I just clarify something, though? He said if you're an American company that moves to Mexico and domicile and produces a car or a widget, whatever, and sends it back into the United States, he would impose the tariff. That's not a Mexican product coming over here. It's an American product produced in Mexico.
Well, that's correct, but we have to understand that the rules of origin in NAFTA is a 25-year marriage that it's pretty complex, and I'm sure that President-elect Trump is going to sit down. He is a businessman, and he's going to understand that this is a marriage that has been there for 25 years and getting divorced.
Sometimes there's bad marriages too, and even if you've kept the marriage together for 25 years, there are irreconcilable differences. My point here is Vicente Fox wasn't talking about the Mexican peso or the U.S. dollar. He was talking about defending the feelings or the rights of Mexicans who've entered the United States illegally.
That is correct, and I think that what we have to do, which is what the mayor of New York was trying to do today, he was trying to differentiate between the criminals and the illegals.
Okay.
We have to.
Has Donald Trump? He said the first thing he would do is deport the 2 or 3 million illegals that had criminal records. Let me point to what you had just said, Mayor Bill de Blasio, on sanctuary cities. Listen.
I think that term has been misused in many cases. The bottom line here is we've got a lot of people in this country who are part of our communities. The vast majority, undocumented immigrants and all immigrants, are law-abiding, going about their work. See them all the time in workplaces, on the bus, on the subway. We don't even know who's documented, undocumented, obviously. We do not want to create a situation where there's a rift. People fear to come forward to the authorities.
Are your thoughts on de Blasio pushing back on the sanctuary city laws?
Well, what I think we should establish is that what the mayor of New York is trying to do, he's trying to communicate and create peace. We have to understand that 40% of the people that President Obama deported more than 2 million people in the last 10 years, in the last 8 years, I should say. 40% of those people were legal, 60% of them were criminals.
Yeah, but let's stay on this, though. No, but we're talking about cities who have decided to push back against federal law that says if you catch an illegal, for whatever reason, you turn it over to ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, then deports them. These cities have said, no, you think this is, are you in favor? I can't figure it out. Are you in favor or against sanctuary cities?
Hispanic community does not agree that we should hide or we should protect criminals, serious criminals. Those people need to be deported tomorrow. What I'm trying to say is that there is a very big difference between the criminals and the ones that are just illegal. So that is what I think the mayor of New York is trying to do.
I don't think so.
He's trying
Listen,
to
I respect your opinion, but I think Rahm Emanuel in Chicago, Mayor de Blasio here in New York has said, no, we won't. It doesn't matter that your status. We're going to protect you. We're not turning you over to ICE for deportation. And I think therein lies the difference. Very quickly.
And that is correct, but then you need the protection, you need the help from the local churches, from the local police, and from the local authorities. And unfortunately, the feds have not had that, because it's very important not to create chaos in the community. And that's what I think that they're trying to do.
Elvira Salazar, thank you very much. Up next, the far left in a rage following reports the Trump team is considering a registry for Muslims in the United States, but it may be perfectly legal. Stay tuned. In the Unresolved Problems segment tonight, the threat of Islamic terrorism in America. The Trump team is reportedly considering a Muslim registry as part of its anti-terror plans. The left is already furious, even though the specifics are still up in the air. But a registry may not actually be illegal or unconstitutional, as some claim. Joining us now from Washington to analyze, constitutional law expert and George Washington University professor, Jonathan Turley. Professor, take us through it. So there are different levels of registries, there are different ideas, and there are different requirements to earn a spot on that registry that may be constitutional and unconstitutional. Tell us which are which.
Sure. Well, first of all, the important thing to note is that if you're just talking about whether something is constitutional as opposed to the policy issue, I think the question is relatively clear. What President-elect Trump is suggesting is not unprecedented and would not be unconstitutional. If he's talking about a monitoring system, particularly isolating given countries that he believes warrant extra attention, those types of measures have been done in the past. Jimmy Carter did that with Iranian students. There was a program called NSEERS after 9/11 that focused on Muslim countries. So it's not unheard of, and it's generally not viewed as unconstitutional to isolate certain places of origin. I think it gets a little more problematic when you isolate religion as the criteria.
So can I stop you there? So what I understand is that if you isolate a country of origin, that's A-okay, no gray area there. But when you start adding religion to the mix, then it becomes a murky area?
It becomes murkier. The Supreme Court hasn't rendered a decision on that, but if you're talking about non-citizens, the advantage still rests with the president. The president's power is at its apex when it comes to the borders, when he determines who can enter, who can leave the United States. The Supreme Court has been fairly uniform in giving great discretion to the president. So with non-citizens, the advantage is with a President-elect Trump. If you start to go to citizens, then the profile changes. Citizens obviously have a full panoply of rights. There's a doctrine called the plenary power doctrine, which is controversial with many, but it's still on the books in terms of precedent. And that affords the president this type of sweeping authority. So he can thread this needle, and it wouldn't be very difficult, but he would be wise to avoid using religion as a criteria as opposed to national origin.
Professor, what about law? I mean, a lot of people who are watching are wondering if a Muslim comes over here and vows to obey Sharia law versus the U.S. Constitution, is there a way to have have that to be some sort of check the box on an application for citizenship or a visa saying, no, I promise I will follow the Constitution, not Sharia law? Would that be unconstitutional?
Well, I think we'd have to look at the specifics. There's lots of people of faith that follow their religious faith personally, but they have to acknowledge that they will comply with U.S. authority and law. There were Jewish courts, for example, in New York, where people voluntarily followed Orthodox rules set by rabbis. But at the end of the day, they had to accept that it was United States law and state law that would govern their lives when it required them to do certain things. And so where you get into trouble with the free exercise is when you start to say that you cannot voluntarily follow your faith or dictates of your own or your own religion.
All right. Professor Turley, thank you very much. Directly ahead, the frontrunner to lead the Democratic National Committee has launched vicious attacks against Donald Trump. Is that appropriate? We'll be right back. In the personal story segment tonight, how will the Democratic Party deal with President Donald Trump? Not exactly subtle, but is nasty rhetoric like this acceptable for the potential chair of the DNC? Joining us now from Washington with reaction, David Tafuri, an attorney and a foreign policy advisor for the 2008 Obama presidential campaign. David, deplorable. He went there. Donald Trump, president-elect, is deplorable.
Look, nasty rhetoric has no place in politics and certainly in governing. If you go up to Capitol Hill even now, you'll see members of Congress from both sides of the aisle treating each other courteously. But Donald Trump ushered in a new level of discourse. Remember, he started his campaign by calling Mexicans rapists. He's the one that called an anchor on this network and talked about her bleeding from wherever. And he's the one who mocked a disabled journalist, shaking his body like a 10-year-old school kid.
Okay, but he's president-elect Donald Trump now. That's a congressman. Is that, you think it's appropriate for a congressman who wants to be the head of the DNC to call the president-elect deplorable? Is that, there's no respect there.
What Congressman Ellison said is that Trump's behavior was deplorable. And he said his behavior on the campaign was deplorable. I think he's hoping that President-elect Trump will change his ways as president.
He said he's deplorable. Quite frankly, now I don't say it, but he
was
his supporters.
Referring,
I say it, and then he clarified to say it about the way his campaign was run. All right, let me ask you this. Hillary Clinton has said when she called half of Trump's supporters a basket of deplorables, she cites that as one of her biggest mistakes, campaign mistakes, maybe even costing her the election. Is this guy, is he making a political suicide with this comment?
I don't think so. I think he's talking about something that a lot of people feel, even probably some people who voted for Donald Trump, who supported his change message, but don't support his antics, don't support the way he treats other people, don't support the way he talks about minorities. His rhetoric is entirely too divisive. It is not presidential. We have never had a president who talks the way he does, who supports and fails to repudiate those who discriminate the way he does.
They lost. You lost. He lost. Stop it. You have the president-elect now, and frankly, everything he's done since he was elected president, there's none of the stuff that you're talking about. He's handling himself very respectfully. No? Do you approve of the way President-elect Donald Trump has handled himself since November 8th?
Well, Eric, he hasn't done anything. I mean, he's been behind the scenes having meetings. That's all. There's no way to evaluate whether he's going to be the Donald Trump we saw on the campaign, which hopefully he will not be. He's been in transition meetings. They don't sound like they're going very well from the media reports. He's made some questionable appointments already. Look at him making Bannon a strategist. Look at the way Bannon has supported and failed to repudiate those who engage in rhetoric. That's white supremacist, supremacy.
I gotta go. You're throwing this stuff in right at the end of the segment. I ran out of time. We'll bring you back and we'll have some discussions on some of that stuff. Anyway, we'll leave it right there, David. Thank you. Coming up next, President Obama refuses to tell protesters to stop the chaotic demonstrations against Donald Trump. Should he be taking a more forceful stand? That debate moments away. Thanks for staying with us. I'm Eric Bolling in for Bill O'Reilly. And in a Factor follow-up segment tonight, the nationwide protests against Donald Trump in Berlin today, President Obama was asked for his take on the demonstrators.
I would not advise people who feel strongly or are concerned about some of the issues that have been raised during the course of the campaign. I wouldn't advise them to be silent. Do not take for granted our systems of government and our way of life. Democracy is hard work. In the United States, if 43% of eligible voters do not vote, then democracy is weakened.
But as we've seen in places like Portland, Oregon, the anti-Trump protests have descended into chaos and violence. Protesting is every American's right, but should President Obama be taking a tougher line against those who are abusing it? Joining us now from Washington, Democratic strategist Janice Fuentes, and from Wausau, Wisconsin, Republican Congressman Sean Duffy. Ms. Fuentes, we all know First Amendment right. You can protest, you can burn the flag, you can even speak hate speak because it's protected hate speak. But when it devolves into the protests devolve into riots, breaking windows, disrupting businesses, hurting people, it's got to stop. President Obama, was he tough enough?
Of course, it has to stop. And President Obama was making reference to what is the very basic, the foundations of a healthy democracy. That, as you pointed out first, yes, it is our right to demonstrate peacefully. And Eric, you could not ever rule out that somebody will get carried away, as Trump calls it, passionate, because it happened many times in his rallies, and get carried away, and that is not right, that is not helpful, and that is not the way that this has gone down. If you think of it, the protest has been mostly peaceful. Look at the one 2 days ago of students in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, but we get that, Ms. Fuentes. We understand peaceful protesting,
yes, so
but there are broken windows, there are businesses that are just... Allow me, I'm sorry, I just want to get Congressman Duffy in here. Congressman Duffy, there are some people who say these protesters are paid agitators.
No.
Well, if you looked at the Project Veritas videos that came out before the election, where the Democrat Party or the radical left wing of the Democrat Party, they were paying protesters to go to Trump rallies and instigate violence, why wouldn't we think that? But going back to Donald Trump, he should say what you just said, Eric. Listen, we all have a right to protest. We all have a right to disagree. But we don't have a right to take to the streets and shut them down, or pull people out of their cars and punch them, or damage property. That's not your right. And he's acting more like the old school Obama, which is a community organizer, instead of a president who can tamp down this energy and excitement that's taking place all over America. Be the president. Tell him to stop. And what's even worse, Eric, is that he did this on foreign soil. Mm-hmm. If you're in America, that's one thing, but to go to foreign soil and say these things, we have a long tradition where we support our president, even though we might have disagreements when you go to a foreign country. Right. I'm disappointed in Obama.
Ms. Fuentes, what about that? I mean, look, when protests turn violent, when protests turn to riot, isn't it time for leaders to step in and say, okay, calm down, that's enough?
Exactly, please.
Did you hear that, though? I didn't hear that. Did you hear that?
Gentlemen. He has never incited violence, okay?
Stop, please. Trump be fair. I didn't say incite violence. I didn't say that. I said when the protests become violent.
If you're unhappy, you should speak up.
Please allow me. When the protests turn violent to riots, isn't it time for a leader to step up and say, stop, it's time to stop? I didn't say he incited violence. I said he didn't do anything to stop the violence.
It is time for a leader, and where's your leader? Where is President-elect Trump? He's the one person who basically had incited a lot of the violence that has happened in his rallies.
Congressman, what would happen if Donald Trump said, stop protesting me?
Listen, the media would be foaming at the mouth if these were Donald Trump protesters and he said what Barack Obama said. Listen, he might not be instigating these rallies, but he's not shutting them down. And frankly, Eric, you know, Black Lives Matter, who are attacking law enforcement officers, he had them to the White House. You have to recognize what President Obama is doing by not shutting down the violence that's coming from the left-wing extremists in his party. And think, listen, but think back to 2000 when we had the Gore v. Trump, Gore v. Bush court case. We dealt with that as Americans in a very effective way, in a peaceful way, and we transitioned power. Look at what the left wing has done to rally and foment and protest.
Quick final thought, please.
Yes. I think what's missing from this discussion is with the rest of the tape, which basically the president did say, you know, elections matter, voting matters, being engaged matters, and you don't get engaged only when you're upset. Okay. You get engaged every day, all year long.
We agree on all that. You, myself, the congressman, thank you very much, President, but we disagree on that other part of it. Quick reminder, signed copies of Bill's huge bestseller, Killing the Rising Sun, and the new kids book, Give Please a Chance, are available on BillO'Reilly.com. And don't forget, if you like the best Christmas and Hanukkah gift on the planet, please check out tickets to the Spin Stops Here live show starring Miller, O'Reilly, and Waters. You can catch them in Tulsa, Oklahoma, Reading, Pennsylvania, Omaha, Nebraska, Tacoma, Washington, and Westbury, Long Island. Info on BillO'Reilly.com. And when we come right back here, are congressional Democrats actually ready to embrace some of Donald Trump's policies? A look at that upcoming. In the Back of the Book segment tonight, how will Democrats in Congress deal with President Trump? There are plenty of calls from the left to stop him at all costs, but congressional Democrats may be ready to work with Trump and find common grounds on issues like infrastructure spending and trade deals. Chuck Schumer, the incoming Senate minority leader, is sounding ready to appeal to the working class voters who helped get Trump elected.
Now, there's a debate going on about whether we should be the party of the diverse Obama coalition, the blue-collar American in the heartland. Some think we need to make a choice and spend all of our energy focused on one group of Americans or another. I believe that there does not have to be a division. In fact, there must not be a division.
Joining us now, two analysts from Boston, James Pindell, a political reporter for the Boston Globe, and from Washington, Kelly Rydell, deputy opinion editor of the Washington Times. Kelly, your thoughts on, well, let's be honest. Chuck Schumer, of course he's going to like an infrastructure spending bill, and of course he's going to like breaking up some of these trade deals. So there are some common grounds between the Trumps and the Democrats.
Yes, there is, and it's also self-preservation moves on the behalf of the Democrats. In 2018, the Democrats on the Senate side have 25 seats up for grabs. That includes 2 independent seats that caucus towards the Democrats, and a lot of them are in these swing states that Donald Trump won, like Ohio, Indiana, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia. There is a reason why Joe Manchin was named to a position of leadership, along with Chuck Schumer. Donald Trump won West Virginia by more than 70 percentage points, percentage of the vote. So, Joe Manchin, and that's all because of repudiation on the Democratic progressive policies, the war on coal. So they need to find some common ground here in order to have a majority if they want one in 2018. They can't be holding up Trump's agenda the entire time.
James, let's deconstruct what went on here. Now you have a Republican president, you have a Republican House, a Republican Senate, and as I pointed out earlier, 31 states are Republican governors. So what happened? What went wrong, and what should they do to fix the Democrat Party?
Well, look, I think there are a couple reasons why Hillary Clinton and the Democrats did so poorly. Remember, put it in context, this is the worst spot the Democrats have been since the 1920s. You talk about how many Republican governors. There are 25 states that have a Republican governor and a Republican legislature. There are just 5 states that have a Democratic governor and a Democratic legislature. This is a pretty low point, obviously, for Democrats. Clearly, they lost the working class vote. They lost in particular the white working class vote. You saw that, number one. Number two, she lost the Obama coalition. You can't just say that she didn't move to the middle or she lost the working class. She also lost the Hispanics, and she lost that the African Americans. There's no question that she did not recreate that Obama coalition.
She lost ground versus 2012 and in a lot of cases versus 2008.
And then of course, when it comes to Donald Trump, he crushed the rural areas. So right now, Democrats are basically a chick who just got hatched. They're looking around, trying to be confused about which direction to go. And the answer is they need to go in all directions right now.
All right. So Kelly, let me ask you this. I saw an interesting stat. Donald Trump won 49 out of 50 states by 2.2 million votes. When you add in California, Hillary Clinton got 1 million votes more than Trump, which put her over in the popular vote. That's a big statement.
Yeah, I mean, Hillary Clinton won the popular vote just because of California and New York City. What this election was a repudiation on the coastal elitism and identity politics. And this is something that the Democrats have been playing for a long time. This has been their hand under President Obama, and it just simply isn't working in middle America and with the white working class. And they need to reconfigure their base. They need to reach out to this group that was really their base under Bill Clinton's term, and devise a way to do that. Now, following Elizabeth Warren's moves, following Bernie Sanders' moves, that just isn't going to be the right ticket for them if they're going to move more left. This has been a repudiation of Barack Obama's progressive agenda.
James,
look, I hear you on the urban-rural divide, a divide that's been there since the founding of this country. But we're also finding here is we have 4 political parties in America. We have the left, we have the right, and now we have up and down. And when we talk about the fact that we have this populist election when Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump basically ran on the same themes, they just had different solutions on what to do with the same problem. Now you're seeing opportunities where Democrats could work with Republicans. You mentioned earlier on infrastructure or on trade deals. This is what makes with this next Congress so highly unpredictable, one of the most unpredictable times we've ever seen.
Hang in there. There's a lot more to talk about. This is a fascinating discussion. James and Kelly will be right back with us after a short break to look at Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders still showing they have the fight in them, but are they only fueling division in the country? Moments away. Continuing now with James Pindell of the Boston Globe and Kelly Rydell of the Washington Times. I want you to listen to these sound bites from Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders.
I know this isn't easy. I know that over the past week, a lot of people have asked themselves whether America is the country we thought it was. The divisions laid bare by this election run deep. But please listen to me when I say this. America is worth it. Our children are worth it. Believe in our country, fight for our values, and never, ever give up.
When we stand together by the millions, we can stop Mr. Trump or anyone else from doing bad things to this country. And I say to Mr. Trump from the bottom of my heart, and I know I speak for millions of fellow Americans, Mr. Trump, we are not going backwards in terms of bigotry. We're going to go forward in creating a non-discriminatory society.
So is rhetoric like this only deepening the political divide when people like Clinton and Sanders should be working, bringing the country together? Instead, they may be divisive. James, your thoughts?
Well, look, right now, Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders are fighting two battles, and they have nothing to do with Donald Trump. First, they're trying to fight a battle among each other on who's going to be that liberal lion in the Senate, who's going to take the role that Ted Kennedy played. And I think both of them can obviously take claim to that, and I think you see them fighting for it. And the second is they're fighting for which Democratic Party we'll see in the next couple of years. Will we see a party that continues to move left? And what Barack Obama definitely did do is he moved the Democratic Party and the country left, or is it going to be a party that moves more to the center, trying to appeal to more Trump voters, as we talked about earlier with the midterms? Look, Donald Trump heads into the White House as probably the most unpopular incoming president in U.S. history.
Based on what I've heard, James, I've heard the same talking point iterated over and over again. Based on what?
I'm talking about every single poll that shows him highly unpopular. Obviously, he won.
You hit the wrong guy with polls.
I'm the guy who says you can read into the polls. Which Democrat will win these primaries? And right now, Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders are trying to make sure that's progressives. Well, obviously, others are going to make the different argument, like Joe Manchin.
I want to get Kelly in here. Kelly, who is the Democrat Party now?
I think the Democrat Party is trying to figure that out right now. You have Bernie Sanders, who's 75 years old, and you have Elizabeth Warren, who's 67 years old. This is very old leadership. If you look on the House side of things, Nancy Pelosi is now in the fight of her life. She is getting challenged by Representative Tim Ryan, who basically is coming out of Ohio saying we need to focus on the white working class voter. So right now, the Democrats couldn't tell you who's going to win this match. It looks as though the party is going to go more progressive, and if that is the case, then good luck to them.
Yeah, how
Hillary
do they?
Clinton.
How do they, James? How do you go more progressive when you yourself point out Barack Obama brought the country left, Bernie Sanders far left, and you got smoked. They got can of whoop ass open on them.
Well, like I said before, I mean, she both obviously lost white working class voters, but she being Hillary Clinton also lost the Obama coalition, particularly among Hispanic voters and among African Americans. And so if you want to focus on that and saying that you brought up the turnout there, in particular certain areas like North Carolina, for example, then obviously she would have won that state. Clearly his electoral vote his electoral college vote was pretty large, and she couldn't exactly pinpoint a reason. But that's why we're going to have this debate within the Democratic Party right now.
Okay, Kelly, we just heard AP is reporting and Reuters is reporting that Lieutenant General Mike Flynn has been named National Security Advisor to President Donald Trump. Quick thought on that before we go.
I think that's a good pick. General Flynn has been very supportive throughout Donald Trump's campaign. He's always been there beside him. He's been a fierce critic of President Barack Obama's ISIS strategy, and there needs to be some strong leadership in that area.
And quick thought from you, James.
I would point out that it's pretty smart that the fact that he got fired from his last job, that this is a position that does not require Senate confirmation.
But nonetheless, a very highly regarded Lieutenant General.
Yes, and obviously very much agrees with President-elect Trump on the role of Islam and terrorism. That's something he's talked about a lot.
Okay, Kelly and James are going to say thank you very much for joining us tonight. Great debate. I love having both of you on, both of those guys on a couple of topics. Have them come back after the break. Anyway, that's it for us tonight. I'm Eric Bolling. I'm in for Bill O'Reilly. Please remember, the spin stops here because we're looking out for you.